You look great. Thank you.
So this triangle of process here, and I consider customer a process because they should be included in the conversation, this becomes a triangle of requirements. This is where we learn what is required or demanded. Okay. This becomes the problem, actually. This is the problem we're trying to solve, and this is the first step in solving that problem. And this is a strategizing behavior. Product management will have a long-term plan of what they're going to do. They should have a long-term plan of what they're going to do. I should be able to go into an organization and see a list of the products that they offer to their customers, and each one should have an owner and should have a 3-year roadmap that tells me what they're going to do to that product over the next 3 years. That's in the most well-run organization.
Yeah. Now, clarify a few things. What is that middle? What is that in the middle again?
Requirements.
Requirements of the products and services that will be provided to the customer. And when you say service here, is you're talking about service to the customer, right?
It's the product and service that we're going to put out.
Right.
Hopefully the customer will consume it.
Okay. All right.
If the customer doesn't consume it, we've got the wrong product and service.
Right. Great.
Unless we're forcing something on our customer.
Yeah, sure.
Which
like government,
do.
Yeah.
For example.
Right.
Yeah. This next process then is project portfolio management. A proposal is made from product management to spend business money to do something to their product, either build it or revise it, basically. And there needs to be a process in place that prioritizes that, because there's always more work than there are resources in an organization. This process needs to consume the business strategy, and it needs to compare the business strategy to the proposal, so that the projects that we're working on, the way that we're spending the money that's available or the resources available to us is on the right work. The byline I give this process is getting the right people on the right projects at the right time. 3 elements. The right people, meaning you've got this set of resources, be sure that you know who they are and what their skills are and how much they have available to lend to the problem solving is the phrase you're using. The second, the right people on the right projects. The right project means that it's the highest priority projects. I used to sing in the Tabernacle Choir, and Dr. Otley said one time, jokingly, he said, pointing at us, the baritones, he said, baritones, the right note at the wrong time is the wrong note. And he laughed, we all laughed, and I drove home that night and thought, that is a profound business concept, and in fact drives this concept. Without a good formal process of portfolio management, we're working on the wrong notes at the wrong time.
Great.
And so the right projects at the right time. A really cool project at the wrong time is not a cool project.
Sure.
So if it's not a priority, if it doesn't match the priorities of the organization, it's a wrong project, no matter how cool it is.
Sure.
And if this changes, let's say that this is all in place and a new CEO comes in.
Yeah.
He changes the strategic intent of the organization. That should immediately feed back into this, and there should be an immediate reallocation of resources to projects that now match the new strategy. Just because you started it doesn't mean you finish it.
Right.
You should always work on what is most priority.
Yeah.
This then becomes
one example that I think of is that when I was a graduate student, one faculty member, at leadership, had the idea of gathering all the online educational resources into one website, and he basically asked one of his graduate students to do it. The graduate student is not a computer major, but he knows how to use computer, and just say, gather everything you can find about education and put it in a website, like a library online. And when I listened to that, he said, "Well, you apparently don't understand how much information there is, on the internet that is available outside, and that project doesn't go anywhere." Now, if he stepped back another 10 years, that was in the beginning of at the end of the 90s, okay? So the internet has been around for a few years. If you go back a few more years, at the very beginning of the internet, well, there's very limited resources out there.
And this actually would have been a feeder.
That would have been okay, But after 10 years, there's already so much. The government, schools, organizations, associations, they all have their websites, and it's just not the right timing anymore.
And that's a perfect example. some clever idea came from here and went to there, but didn't get compared to this. And so a decision was made to do it, and in fact passed that on to project management and put somebody to work. And this arrow didn't exist.
I see.
That's a wrong project.
Yeah.
And probably doomed from the very start.
Can you give an example?
The one you just gave is a really good one.
Okay.
But it happens in so many organizations. Trying to think of one that's most. Well, let's talk about Singapore.
Okay.
One of the main customers I have in Singapore is the library board, which sounds kind of innocuous, but it's not. It's the biggest budget in Singapore. Is the library.
The library board?
Yep. They own all knowledge management on the island.
Oh.
And Singapore wants to be the leader in knowledge management in the world. And their budget is huge. It's not just the buildings and the books.
I see.
It's all knowledge management. It's all the websites. It's everything that's available to human beings on the island.
For both public entities and private? Private entity too?
They help to make all of that available and try to put metadata around it, try to make it functional and useful to every user. They spend a lot of money, a lot of money on that. We just, about 3 years ago, they called me in on a project that was in trouble, that wasn't going well. And in talking to the minister himself, we went through this exercise first and discovered that somebody inside his user base had said, we need this particular project. And I unfortunately can't tell you what it was, but needs this particular project. And they quickly developed a solution, and they bypassed this process and went right to work on it. In the meantime, when the other ministers found out what was being done, 3 other ministers were working on the exact same thing. And so 4 times that had gone directly into project, bypassing this, which means they were bypassing this. And by putting the intent of the organization into a formal process that reviews all project or all spending proposals, then you make sure that you get rid of those duplications and you make sure that you're working on the right stuff. Otherwise, they had spent millions of dollars on this before they discovered that 3 other groups were working on it and had spent millions of dollars. And it was a terrible waste. And what was causing the project to not go well is that this 4th one started now going back to the people who had already helped on 1, 2, and 3, and they were saying, I have done this already, I am not going to do this again, and they were not getting the help they needed from the organization, so they weren't getting their deliverables done because of lack of interest. It was missing the executive support. This is where you garner the executive support for everything that goes on in the organization. Without that executive support, you are not going to get the success that you need.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to absorb. You are making this simple, but it really has a lot of things, inside here. Now, so on top is typically the business strategies and enterprise architecture. That's typically the executives,
this
right?
is the leadership.
The leadership, okay.
And when there's a change in leadership, this changes.
And what is who are the product managements, the mid-level?
They're throughout the organization. Whoever is assigned as the owner of a solution, whether it's a huge, really public solution or if it's a small component. So if you go to Ford, for example, product management is well understood there. Every car title has an owner. Every component inside the car has an owner.
I see.
Okay. Every process that's used for manufacturing or for quality control or for whatever their processes are, project management, each one of those has an owner. Every single step and every single tangible item has an owner, and all rests inside of there. And they're all over the organization.
Okay. So let's say, Apple, something that, we are all familiar with, and so that would be all the C-level people. And the product management may be probably not as big as like the president for iPhone, but maybe the manager for iPhone battery, and
it goes. There are levels. There are tiers of product management, and Apple is such a good example because they build their own stuff and they use it in their next level, and then build their own stuff and use it in their next level, so that everything they build, they want to be sure and leverage it across as many of the next levels as they can. So they think broadly at the lowest level, so that it rolls up into multiple large, really cool things like the iPads and the iPhones and the whatever their next little invention is going to be. But that's the conglomeration of reusing or leveraging these products that are sitting down here. This is well in place at Apple.
Sure.
Leadership takes this responsibility and says, here's our vision,
Sure.
here's where we want to go, this is the way we do things. I have 4 things in mind. It's an iPad, it's an iPhone, it's a this and it's a that.
Sure.
Television being one of them. Those are their 4. And everything they're building underneath always has to map to one of those 4. If it doesn't map to one of those 4, you're out of sync.
Yeah, okay.
This is broken.
And so if we go back to that the example of the broken communication in the process, it would have been like, let's say, a big customer of Apple comes in and says, hey, I really need to have a headphone that looks like Beats, so they go to the product management, have this conversation and we'll go straight to the development, And
at Apple, if it goes from here to there and bypasses this, that person gets fired. They are very strict about that. You must go through this process. You are not allowed to put people to work.
Right.
This process will put people to work. This process will propose where people will go to work.
Okay.
And if they bypass this because, by email and send it off to Peter and say, Peter, would you just work on this? Could you design something like this?
Yeah. They say forget it.
He'll get fired.
Right. And the project portfolio management, who are the typical people that would be in this management?
One of the arrows I'm going to draw here.
Are they kind of like team people?
Goes there. When you look at the arrows coming into that, advocacy from each of those areas needs to be on that team.
Okay.
So you have some executives, you have some customer. You don't have customers in there, but like your marketing person comes in and takes the voice of the customer. You have high-level product managers in there. You have a conglomerate. This is a backward arrow. You also have people from that process in there. They have to live with the decision. They help to make the decision. And so it's a group of advocates.
I see. And it reminded me of the correlation in the church.
That's exactly the example.
Okay.
In fact, when I first developed this, one of the papers that I wrote was about the concept of councils in the LDS Church. For my master's degree, it was about councils, and I used the LDS Church.
I think the council system is very intelligent.
It works.
I mean, Elder Bartlett
if
really
it's well constructed of advocacy.
Sure, yeah. Well,
and it's not
that's right. Lots of time when councils don't work is because you have one strong authority, who just say it, and other people know that they're supposed to just keep quiet. That's when the council does not work.
Not a council.
Yeah, when you have a leader, who really works in the way that the council is supposed to work, then everybody contributes, and it becomes and everybody has to have a single-minded purpose. In that council
has an advocacy.
Yeah.
And I use that word advocacy very carefully. An advocacy, when you're an advocate, you have a group of constituents out here. And this group of constituents are those for whom you have to understand their needs, and you're going to be their voice.
Sure.
And so you take all of those and you take them to your meeting where you're the advocate. And where the problem falls apart in advocacy is when this person sits in this meeting, they make a decision and he doesn't like the decision. He takes it back to these people and says, well, here's what we decided to do, but I didn't like this. But we decided to do it, so we're going to go ahead and do it. I just want you to know I didn't vote for it. That's a bad behavior. Advocacy works 2 directions. They listen carefully to their constituents. They take the needs and the wants of their constituents to this meeting, and they act like their constituents. They work in the decision-making process, and then they walk out of that meeting acting like it was their idea. Whatever the decision was, they endorse that decision back to these advocates, back to these constituents.
So it's a two-way arrow.
It's a many-to-one and one-to-many relationship, and it goes back that way.
Yeah.
And if this is broken, these guys fall apart.
Right. And at the same time, that this representative and the larger management group have to be on the same page. Yeah, they can't just say, I am advocating, for my constituencies, and so, forget you. I'm not going to do this.
I have sat in meetings, not because I'm a leader of the church, but as a secretary to a committee or something. There have been major leaders of the church at the highest levels of the church, including first presidents, in those meetings, with very strong opinions
Yeah.
and table pounding behavior
Yeah.
of discussion.
Sure.
Total disagreement.
Sure.
Concept, talk.
Sure.
Decision, and they walk out, and you would never have a clue
Yeah.
who was in favor and who was against. You would never know, because not one person leaving those meetings will ever say, "That's President Monson's idea."
Yeah. Yeah.
No. We decided.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
And that's the way the council works.
Yeah. Great.
In fact, in the research that I did, and this was many years ago, I compared, President Reagan's administration financially. It was for my master's in finance, so it was a financial discussion. President Reagan's administration was considered financially successful. President Carter's was not. Now, politically, I'm not telling you who I agree with and who I don't, but that's the general public basically says Reagan was successful, Carter was not in the financial arena. And there are evidences of that, like 19% prime rate. I don't know if you remember those days. They were horrible.
90% what?
19 prime rate was at 17
Oh,
to 19%.
yeah.
And I was the treasurer of an international company at the time, and it was just impossible to do anything.
Yeah.
And so I compared those two, and with this concept of council, it came out to what you just said. President Reagan surrounded himself with people that he listened to and trusted, and they consulted together and went out in unison with solutions. President Carter surrounded himself with people that would listen to him. President Carter was extraordinarily intelligent. He's still alive. Extraordinarily intelligent. President Reagan, not so much.
Actor.
he wasn't President Carter.
Right.
President Carter, because everything had to come to his office. Every decision came to his office, and he had a bunch of yes people on his cabinet.
Yeah.
That was not an effective council. President Obama's experiencing the same problem. He's surrounded by people that have his political view, whether or not we agree with it. They have his political view, and they're there to protect his view. They're not there to act on behalf of their constituents. In fact, they're only finding the constituents that agree with them, and they're leaving a bunch of other people out. And he's experiencing the consequence of that now.
It's sad, but
and that's the concept there in the portfolio management. It's the same council concept.
Right.
So that being said, the decision then here is made what you're going to spend your money on, and then projects are started. Project is an implementation. It is not a strategizing behavior. When you're a project manager, one of the things I tell them is you don't have to like the solution. You just have to make it successful. Liking the solution happened over here. Liking the solution got it to you. You don't have to like it. You just have to make it successful. You may not agree that it's the right thing to do. Not yours to agree with. That happened over here. Now, that's why there's a backward arrow. If you're the project manager and you have a concern, you certainly should take it back, because maybe you knew something they don't. But they'll make a decision. Your job is to implement it, not to like it. Now, if it challenges you morally or ethically, then you have to do something about it. But if it's just something you don't agree with, build it and make it work. That's your job. And that has helped me as a project manager so many times, because there's some things I've seen people build and I thought, this is not going to work. It's what they wanted to do. It worked for a couple of years and then it didn't work. But for them, it's what they wanted. My job was to make it successful. That was my job. That's an implementation skill. Now, you talked about Agile. Agile is inside here.
Yes.
Agile is a project management method.
Right.
Or philosophy. It's not even a method, it's a philosophy.
Well, when I talked to Steve, I said if you put it in the ADDIE process, it's really just development. It is not the...
Well, I'm going to change that, actually.
Okay.
If you'll let me.
Okay, please do.
That conversation.
Please do.
Down here, development life cycle is where that rests. And every other life cycle. Here at BYU, we have a project management process, or 2 or 3. But we have 11 development life cycles that we support. 11 of them. Movie production, television production, radio production, major construction, minor construction, software development, software integration, networking, hardware development. I'm forgetting some. All of these have different development life cycles. And ADDIE is just a development life cycle. And that's where a lot of the confusion in the conversation is taking place. These two are getting confused or combined, and that's not a good behavior. They work closely together, but let me show you why.
Please.
You used Addy. I'll show you. This is a typical software development lifecycle. We investigate, we design, we build, and actually I'm changing this to build and test, and we validate with the customer, we deploy, and then we maintain, we operate, we expose, we sell, we do all the things that I'll just say maintain here. We keep the thing running and make it viable, basically. These are steps in a process, just like Addy has its steps. And every one of these companies you go to, you'll see a series of steps like this.
Right.
These are phases of the development life cycle. In today's world, when we're creating all the time things that we've never ever done before, it's impossible to do all of one of those in a single pass. You can't do a single project and get all that done because you don't know what this end looks like. We're creating stuff we've never ever even seen before. And so I'll use a triangle equals a project, with the recognition that a project has a defined beginning, a defined end, a specific deliverable, and a budget. A beginning and end is deliverable and a budget. That's a project. 2 weeks long, 2 months long, 2 years long, whatever it is. It's becoming very common now to do one project for investigation. And at the end of that, you get some kind of a feasibility study, for example.
So it's kind of like a little pilot to
It's an
try.
investigation project or a concept. A lot of people do proof of concept. Okay, and then at a certain point, they have enough information to decide whether or not to proceed, and they may start their design project at that point. They'll finish out the feasibility study, and they'll start the design, and out of here comes a prototype, for example. Okay. And that's the deliverable of that project. And at some point, you have enough information that they're ready now to go ahead and start building, testing, and even maybe validating with the customer. And so they'll do a project like that. And then, and here at BYU, we do this a lot because some of our solutions go out to many campuses. We can't deploy at the same time at every campus, depending on what their academic life cycles are. So we may have yet another project just for the purpose of deploying. That's actually 4 projects to get one solution on the marketplace. And this is more and more common in the industry now. All of these together, all 4 of these are called a program. And program management is not the same as project management, but it fits inside of this project box. So it also includes program management. Now, Agile is just one way to get from here to here. It's one philosophy for doing project management. And this, I'm on a soapbox on this one. But a lot of people say that the old-fashioned waterfall is not old-fashioned. Waterfall is what we do. If you go step by step, it's waterfall. Here's Agile, and I'm pleased. This is not boasting in any way. I understand Agile because I'm one of the 13 people that started Agile.
Really?
We went up in 1999 to Snowbird and sat with a group of us because we had CIOs who were complaining that our projects, our 18-month projects were coming out with nothing because in that 18 months so many things had changed that what came out at the end of it wasn't what they wanted. And so 13 of us got together up from across the country, got together up at Snowbird and said, we've got to think of something to respond to this. Because what was happening is that CIOs were starting to say, in order to fix this problem, no project will last more than 90 days, period. And when you start implementing false parameters, you start getting false results. And that's a false parameter. Some projects just can't be done in 90 days. And sometimes 90 days is way too long. But they were saying 90 days, that's life. Because they weren't seeing things frequently enough to feel comfortable that what they were going to get at the end was adequate. And so we got together and talked about that, and Agile, as a philosophy, was born. Agile was not meant to be a process, it was meant to be a philosophy. And the philosophy...
That was the first time that people used this vocabulary?
Yep.
Really?
It came out of those conversations.
What meeting was that?
It's just an informal group of us.
Of CIOs?
No. Just mostly project management consultants.
Okay.
I had a consulting firm based in Palo Alto that was working with Hewlett-Packard and the government, and and Dell and Bank of America, and had some pretty large clients. And so a group of us just got together and said, we've got to talk about this. We as a group of project management experts have to decide what we're going to say about this. It was very meaningful. It was a very useful conversation.
And who wrote it down like later? It becomes so big now.
Well, the interesting thing is that the philosophy was originally written, and you'll find it online. You'll find pictures of the people together. You won't find there. I think you'll find 9 names on. There are 4 of us who chose not to have our names attached to it. I'm not one to put my name out in the marketplace. I don't. My dad taught me when I was 12. When I was 12 years old, I wrote my name in some wet cement. And my dad was walking to church one day and saw my name there, and he came home and he pointed his finger at me and said, "Fools' names and fools' faces always appear in public places." And I was so embarrassed, so embarrassed. It's just become a habit of mine not to put my name on these kinds of things. So what you'll find in there, I was the author of a good portion of it. But then those that were there, Jim Hightower and Alistair Coburn, and I'm forgetting names now, but they were all high level consultants. Bill Kern, high level consultants. They went out and started to espouse this process, and some of them said, or this philosophy said, I could build a process around this, and out of that was born Scrum. As a result of that, XP is a part. All these offshoots. Crystal is another one that's come out of it. There's these offshoots that have come from these consultants, and then people past that have said, "Well, I can't just live on a philosophy. I need to put a process around it." And so they have built a process. And if you really go deep into the processes they've built, they haven't built new process. They've just reorganized and renamed old process. And that goes back to our original philosophy. Agile originally was a philosophy with three overarching values: frequent delivery to the customer, frequent communication with the customer, and frequent iteration of proven practices. And that became the important one that people started to overlook. Frequent iteration of proven practices. Let me show you how that works.
Those words are very loaded.
Oh yeah, when you really dive into those, you see there's a lot behind it. But if you want to put it into a simple picture, you get this two-year-long project, which before that day we would start here and we say to our customer, we'll be back in 2 years with our year solution, which was bad behavior. Agile simply said, let's break that up into increments, and we in our documentation call these increments. Let's break that solution up into increments, typically deliverable based, and make sure that at the end of every one of these increments there is some deliverable. Something goes to the customer, a deliverable to the customer. Now, not necessarily a final deliverable, so it could be a prototype, or it could be documentation, or it could be a requirements document, or something comes out of each one of those increments that the customer can hold, approve, agree to, and have a sense of the progress of the project, and make changes. So out of each one of those, that's the frequent delivery to the customer. Now the customer also needs to be involved in the team that's doing that increment. That's frequent communication with the customer. And as silly as it seems today, 15 years later, back in those days, it wasn't that common to have the customer sit on our project teams. It was not common, in fact.
It was not, huh?
And it's become really quite popular over the last 15 years. To have the customer. But that's not the practice 15 years ago. It was a practice, but not the common practice. It was a practice we espoused in my consulting firm. But boy, we got pushback. American Airlines, one of my customers, Sabre, American Airlines. We had to fight tooth and nail in the beginning to get them to agree. If Sabre, their IT department, was doing a project, we wanted representation from the customer who was going to receive it. Sitting in those teams, oh, no, we trust you. No, you don't. You get in there and you listen to what we say, and you tell us when we're wrong and when we're right. But now they won't do a single project without having customers. It has changed. So that's frequent delivery and frequent communication. Iteration of proven processes. Inside of each of these, if you think about it, a project is a defined beginning, a defined end, a specific deliverable, and a budget. That's a project. project doesn't mean big. It means a beginning and end, deliverable, and a budget. If you've got something at home that has a deadline, you've got a project. And project management processes should support you in getting those done. And so a typical project management process is identify requirements, plan it, execute it, and close it out and debrief it. That's a typical process, project management. That's this box. In support of this box, okay? At the end of this, one of the things we said was, when you get to this part, after you've done the planning and you've done the execution and you're in the debrief, do a lessons learned here and pass the learnings into the next planning exercise. So that when you then execute and you do lessons learned, you pass those to the next exercise and you get better and better and better as you go through the process. That was one of the things that we introduced in the Agile concept. And so it was organizational improvement based on frequent iteration of proven practices. Project management is a proven practice. So, for example, if you were to go to my class that I teach in the IS program, it's a semester long, and I teach them a process of project management. Is it the process? No, it's a process. But what I've tried to do is I've tried to pull together the parts of project management processes that are essential to be done, and I've tried to take out the little fluffy things that people have added to make it their own, so that whatever they learn in the class, they can apply to whatever process they get shown. But the process is basically plan the project, execute the project, and debrief. That's the process. That's a proven practice. And every increment is treated like a project. This is a waterfall process. Just in that little piece. Right. And you're iterating the waterfall. There's nothing wrong with waterfall.
That's right. Well, you call it waterfall. May I call that Addy? It's really
Addy is a life cycle, but it's waterfall. It's step by step. It's phase by phase.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with waterfall, but they've associated the term waterfall with bad. Big.
Well, in IT we like terms, and so we like terms that are cool. When you have a term that has been around for so long, that people don't like it. Same thing in instructional technology too. Nowadays we don't like terms like computer-based learning. Or e-learning. They dated. Computer-based learning is in the 80s. E-learning is in the late 90s and even early 2000. But they are basically, the similar concepts, with some changes. MOOC now is cool, but I think in a few years it won't be as cool as it is now.
But the concept is that it's a maturity issue. You learn something, mature, you call it something new. You learn something, mature, and call it something new. We're all out. It's line upon line, precept upon precept. It's an eternal concept.
Sure.
In fact, I was just reading yesterday, in Doctrine and Covenants, I think it was section 94, if I recall. It's where Joseph Smith, the Lord reveals to Joseph Smith the words of John. And one of the things he says is, even the Lord God, becoming Son of Man, received things line upon line, precept upon even the Son of Man.
Sure.
So if the Son of Man, then certainly it's good enough for you.
Right.
It was very meaningful to me. And it's a step at a time. And it's okay to do it a step at a time. And it doesn't make old wrong. As you learn more and you make a change, change doesn't mean wrong. It means new and learned and mature. It doesn't mean wrong.
Right.
But what's happened is that as this agile concept, and by the way, being one of the initiators of this, I'm a proponent big time of agile. I'm a Scrum Master. I believe in all that stuff, but not for every project. It has to be the right process for that project. For example, if you're building something you have never done before, this is not a good way to go. Because they lose sight of the end as they do these little scrums. And pretty soon everything has moved back so far.
For example, the LDS Church typically does not use an agile process when they
try over and over again.
Right? Like if you launch something, I work with the church leaders in China a lot, and if you want to get some certain things approved, the church does not launch it and see how it goes and come back.
They don't.
No, never.
No.
Yeah. They ask all these questions. Make sure you have answered all the questions and know as much as you can before you try to have
get one chance, and if you blow it the
that's
first
right.
chance, it's kind of gone.
That's right.
They're sensitive to that.
Yeah.
So, agile, that breaking it up is an implementation issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's saying whatever your life cycle, whether it's ADDIE or whatever else it is, whatever your life cycle is, you need a process to implement that life cycle. You need a process, that's project management, to implement the life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And these are not synonymous. This is not a driving process.
I'm sorry. I still need to see more of the difference between the project management and development life cycle. So in this graph, which part is?
Let me grab something real quick.
Okay, sure.